Today, we're doing a deep dive into an area of the law that is, it's just profoundly difficult.
It's incredibly complex, yeah.
We're looking at how you determine a monetary value for an irreparable loss, specifically wrongful death from medical negligence.
Right. And the source material you send over, this really rigorous white paper, it goes straight at the heart of the problem.
Which is what, exactly?
It's how the legal system tries to square this circle. You have the pricelessness of a human life on one side, and then the legal requirement to provide financial compensation on the other.
And the authors are arguing the current system is broken.
Completely. Especially in places like Florida, where you have these uncapped awards for emotional suffering. The outcomes are so inconsistent, it undermines public trust.
So their mission is to propose a fix, a new framework.
Exactly. By standardizing what are called non-economic damages.
And the thing that just immediately grabbed me is this core contradiction they point out. You have families in court, and they are saying, correctly, that no amount of money can ever replace their loved one.
Of course not.
But then, in the very next breath, the system requires them to ask a jury for a very specific dollar amount for that loss, for grief, for companionship.
It's a cognitive dissonance baked right into the process. The paper basically says that trying to measure the immeasurable is the source of all the chaos and, frankly, the injustice we see.
Okay, let's unpack this. To get at that contradiction, the paper argues we have to start with a really fundamental distinction. We have to separate two very different types of harm.
Yes, this is so crucial. You have cases where the victim of negligence survives and cases where the victim dies.
And they are not the same thing at all, legally or morally speaking.
Not at all. Think about it. If a patient survives but is, say, permanently disabled, the damages for pain and suffering are for a lived, ongoing experience.
It's for them, for the person who is actually suffering.
Right. The compensation goes directly to the injured person for a lifetime of, pain, trauma, limitations. It's unpredictable. They need resources to manage that life.
That makes sense. It's compensation for a real, measurable impairment and an unpredictable future.
Exactly. But now look at the wrongful death case. The person who suffered the initial harm is gone. Their suffering has ended.
So the law is now compensating other people.
It's compensating third parties, family members, a spouse, children, parents, and it's for relational loss, grief, loss of guidance, loss of companionship.
These are real profound losses.
Absolutely profound, but they don't have a natural upper bound. There's no unit of measurement for grief that our economy recognizes.
That distinction between ongoing lived suffering versus third-party relational loss, I find that incredibly compelling. I had never really thought about it in those terms.
It's the key. The authors argue that treating these two things as if they're the same is where the system goes completely off the rails.
Which brings us right into that moment in the courtroom.
The moment of maximum tension.
The judge tells the jury that human life is priceless. And then he tells them to go into a room and put a price tag on the grief.
It's an impossible task.
Yeah.
And it creates what the paper calls a jury lottery.
A lottery.
It has to be. Because there's no objective scale for suffering, the final number has less to do with the actual loss and more to do with, well, other things.
Like what?
The paper lists them out. The eloquence of the lawyer.
How good of a storyteller they are.
Right. How emotionally the witnesses present themselves. The specific 12 people on that jury. And this is a huge one. The venue where the trial happens.
So you could have two families who suffer almost the exact same tragedy, lose a father in the same way, same circumstances. But one trial is in a small rural county and the other is in a big city known for huge verdicts.
And the outcomes could be millions and millions of dollars apart.
That's the inequity.
That's the structural inequity.
Yeah.
The paper says this isn't individualized justice, it's just arbitrary.
And that's where their fix standardization comes in. They're saying, look, if grief is truly incomparable, then we shouldn't be forcing people to competitively price it in a courtroom.
Exactly. Equal recognition of that loss is more just than pretending we can be precise about something so subjective.
They're choosing fairness over the illusion of a perfect customized number.
Yes. Predictability over chaos.
Okay, but whenever you talk about limits or caps, the immediate counterargument, and it's a powerful one, is that you're devaluing human life.
It's a very effective soundbite.
The paper takes that on directly, though.
It does. It calls that argument analytically weak.
Why weak?
Because it misses the point. The limit isn't saying the grief is small. It's rejecting the legal fiction that a jury can accurately price it.
So a fixed award is really a statement about the limits of money itself.
Precisely. It's the law saying, this is the highest, most equitable recognition we can offer because money can only do so much. It's about the remedy, not the loss.
And they put their proposed number in context, right? They compare it to other states.
They do. A lot of states already have caps, and they're often, around $250,000, maybe $500,000.
So against that backdrop, their proposed baseline of $1 million.
It's positioned as being comparatively generous while still bringing that needed predictability.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because they don't just say, okay, a flat $1 million for everyone. They get that the relational impact of a death isn't always the same.
Right. They build in proportionality. They recognize that, the grief an elderly parent feels losing their adult child is profound, but the loss for a 5-year-old who loses their mom it's structurally different.
It's a developmental loss, too.
A huge developmental loss. And the law needs to see that difference without just throwing it back to a jury to guess at a number.
So what does this graduated system look like?
They propose tiers. The base award, that $1 million figure, would apply in cases with, say, an adult decedent who doesn't have a surviving spouse or any minor children.
Okay, that's the baseline for the relational loss.
That's the baseline. Then you have what they call enhanced awards.
For those who lose more of their family structure?
Exactly. So Tier 2 might be for a surviving spouse, which would increase the award to recognize that loss of partnership.
And the highest tier.
The highest enhancement would be for surviving minor children. Because the compensation there isn't just for grief, it's for, 2 decades of lost guidance, education, support, all the things a parent provides.
So it's about structuring the award to meet the real-world scope of the loss.
It is. It balances that institutional need for fairness with the actual circumstances of the family.
Okay, let's shift to the practical side of this, the gears of litigation. How does this change the incentives for lawyers and for the hospitals? The paper had a really interesting point on attorney fees.
This is the linchpin. It's a total game changer.
Explain that.
Right now, lawyers work on contingency. They take a percentage of the final award, often 30 or 40%. With no cap on the award, there's no cap on their potential fee.
Which incentivizes them to aim for the biggest possible verdict.
Of course. The paper flips this. It says the standardized award, that $1 million, should be awarded exclusive of reasonable attorney fees.
So the fees are paid on top of the million, not taken out of it.
Exactly. And that is transformative for the family.
How so?
Because it means the full compensation, the entire $1 million, is preserved for them. It doesn't get sliced up the second it's awarded.
And it changes the incentives for everyone else.
Profoundly.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. If you take away the chance for a lawyer to get a huge multi-million-dollar payday, will they still take on these really hard, expensive cases?
It's a valid question. The paper's answer is that by guaranteeing reasonable fees on top of the award, you make the outcome more reliable.
So it's less of a gamble.
Much less. The hospital is now encouraged to settle quickly because they know dragging it out only increases their costs, the attorney fees, without changing their maximum exposure on the non-economic side. The lawyer gets paid fairly for their work, but the system pushes towards efficiency, not a high-stakes lottery.
Okay, so that's the financial accountability. But what about deterrence? The argument is always that these massive verdicts are what keep hospitals in line.
The paper argues that deterrence theory is, well, it's deeply flawed in healthcare.
Why?
Because the research they cite shows medical negligence rarely comes from someone consciously taking a risk. It's not a calculated gamble.
It's human error.
It's system failure. It's communication breaking down between shifts. It's a doctor who's just exhausted from being overworked. Cognitive overload.
So a $20 million verdict doesn't fix a broken patient handoff protocol.
Precisely. The fear of a verdict doesn't address the root cause. Real accountability, they argue, is institutional. It's oversight, it's professional discipline, it's forcing a hospital to actually change its system.
Like implementing mandatory checklists.
Checklists, better fatigue management, things that actually prevent the next error.
So this framework really narrows the jury's role then.
It streamlines it completely. Yeah. The negligence part is handled administratively. The jury's only job is to determine if a compensable loss happened and which tier applies. It takes the emotional theater out of it.
Okay, let's talk about the final point from the paper, which feels, I don't know, almost philosophical. It's about the risk of commodification.
Yeah, the idea of moral restraint.
What does that mean?
It gets to the heart of what the money is for. It's meant to be a recognition of loss.
Hmm.
It's meant to provide resources to cope counseling, maybe an education fund. It's not meant to be a source of personal enrichment.
A windfall.
Right. And the paper argues that when awards get into the tens of millions, they risk turning grief into a transactional event. It undermines the whole moral purpose.
So standardization is about drawing a line between compensation that helps a family heal and an award that turns tragedy into, well, winning the lottery.
That's it exactly. They're saying $1 million plus the enhancements is a generous, sufficient amount to start a foundation, to get counseling, to create a legacy. It helps without creating that moral hazard of turning loss into a competitive financial opportunity.
So what does this all mean? If you had to boil down the author's core argument for us, what is it?
I think the core argument is a call for honesty and equity in the system. They're saying that by making these clear distinctions, by admitting money has its limits, and by focusing on real systemic accountability, we can create a system that's fair.
So standardization isn't about minimizing the loss.
Not at all. It's about choosing principle over the chaos we have now. It's about ensuring every family gets equal recognition for an unbearable loss.
It's a really thought-provoking way to reframe the entire problem.
And I think the most surprising takeaway for you, the listener, might be that true accountability, the kind that stops the next death, might have very little to do with the final number in a courtroom.
And much more to do with administrative oversight and transparency inside the hospitals themselves. Which brings us to our final provocative thought from all this material. If the point of the law is to compensate for relational loss, and we know that loss changes in scope over a lifetime, losing a 90-year-old grandparent is different than losing a 30-year-old parent. Are we so focused on demanding emotional theater in the courtroom that we're missing the chance to create structural, proportional justice for families behind the scenes? It's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing the source material with us for this deep dive. We're really interested to hear what you think about this framework.